Hello everyone, Rhonin Redhair, or Rhonin Dragonheart. It's not been given a whole lot of time to shine within World of Warcraft, but add the books, add the comics, and you got yourself a raptor army leading, brawling badass of a mage whose story deserves to be told.
Citizens of Dalaran, raise your eyes to the skies and observe.
We first meet him in the book Day of the Dragon, where our Rhonin is not doing so hot. As a member of the Kirin he'd been sent out on a mission, and he had warned them Rhonin worked best alone. But no one had listened, and he had been forced to do what he had to do in order to succeed. The others on that mission had not heeded his warnings, nor understood the necessity of his dangerous work. With the typical contempt of the non-talented, they had gone charging directly into the path of his grand spell, and thus most had perished along with his true targets, a band of orc warlocks intent on raising from the dead what some believed had been one of the demons of legend. Which might sound a little bit weird, seeing demons as these mythical, legendary creatures. But Day of the Dragon was released in 2001. It's 24 years old now, which is a fact best not to linger on. This disaster put him on thin ice with the Kirin. Some even wanted to expel him altogether, but a chance to do some good was offered by the Red Dragon Korealstras. Although our Khaz'goroth kept the being dragon part a secret, he'd been trying to find ways to save his beloved Queen Alexstrasza, who was currently firmly in the hands of the orcs. How's that possible, you might wonder? The might of the dragons controlled by the orcish hordes. Well, a lot of history and manipulation there, all centered at the Black Dragon aspects. Deathwing, over 10,000 years ago, during the War of the Ancients. This war had Azeroth's defenders try to protect the world from a massive Burning Legion invasion. Deathwing, still called Neltharion at the time, is listening to the whispers of the old gods, who convince him to turn on his fellow aspects, and so he convinces them to give up a portion of their powers and place it within an artifact called the Dragon Soul.
It is done. All have given that which must
Tremble,
be given.
mortals, before the
I now
coming of
seal
the
the
end.
Dragon Soul forever.
This, he promised them, would be the key to their salvation in this war. But they didn't know that Deathwing had not given up anything of his powers, and while the disc was very powerful at destroying the demonic forces of the Legion, Deathwing quickly turned it on the defenders and his fellow aspects as well. Even so, they managed to separate him from the disc and win the War of the Ancients. The artifact was hidden away within the world and protected with enchantments which prevented Deathwing or other dragons from wielding the disc. Millennia later, and wouldn't you know it, orcs from a whole different planet set foot through the Dark Portal, and this Deathwing could use. He sends them visions, guided them on how to use the Dragon Soul, now known as the Demon Soul, and use it to force Alexstrasza on her knees. With the Queen of the Dragons under their control, the Horde now had the power of the Red Dragonflight at their side, taking the dragons into the sky as they fought against the Alliance, even keeping the Queen under control, forcing her to breed, get them new units to fight from the sky. A horrible situation, but going against the Demon Soul was not something a Khaz'goroth or the other aspects could really do. The might of the artifact was devastating, so despite Khaz'goroth asking them, the other aspects had not mustered a rescue for their queen. But he wasn't about to give up. Rhonin would be his ticket to save his beloved, and in turn, it was a chance for the red-haired mage to somewhat redeem himself. Again, believing at first that he needed to go at it all by himself. He regretted each and every one of those deaths more than he had ever let on to his masters in the Kirin. They haunted him, urged him on to more risky feats. And what could be more risky than attempting, all by himself, to free the Dragon Queen from her captors? He had to do it all by himself, not only for the glory it would bring him, but also, Rhonin hoped, to appease the spirits of his former comrades. Spirits who never left him even a moment's rest. Even Khaz'goroth did not know about those troubling specters. Likely a good thing, as it might have made him question Rhonin's sanity and worth. So, he accepted this suicide mission of observing what was going on with the Dragonmaw clan and liberate the Dragon Queen. Despite his personal wishes, the quest would require a party to complete. To guide him to the port and eventually stick at his side, there was none other than Vrisa Windrunner, youngest of the Windrunner sisters. Where Illyria had fallen for Trellian, Sylvanas for Nephanos, Vrisa continued the tradition, even though at first she was a bit hesitant towards Rhonin, a bit suspicious and not all too happy with him being so late. Ultimately, they'd fall in love. Then they'd run into Duncan Centurus, a paladin of the Silver Hands, who also doesn't like Rhonin at the start, but that's more due to some old school lore, as once upon a time, the story offered a much more prejudiced look at the spellcasters. Being a mage was not something highly regarded, which is why mages gathered within Dalaran to begin with, as it offered them a place to practice their craft without any prejudice. This man, this paladin, started off high and mighty, a bit pompous towards Rhonin, which was eased by the beauty of Vrisa. But considering he sacrificed himself to bring down a dragon-riding orc and clearing the way for the rest of them to continue their quests, the man was quite the legend. Falstad Wildhammer also helped with fighting said dragon riders and would join them all the way to Grimbatol. Lastly, a much more unexpected ally for Rhonin, that was the Black Dragon Deathwing himself. Neltharion has a bit of a problem when it comes to mating and creating offspring. His corruption within has burst forth to the surface, meaning that mating with him often results in death. There's one mate still walking around, Sinfaria, but she has been horribly scarred with wounds that burn eternally. Seeing how getting his own eggs is a bit of a problem, Deathwing figured to go for Alexstrasza's eggs, and since he didn't want to use his own might, accidentally have them smash it or see the orcs do some crazy things, he figured that using Rhonin's quest for his own ambitions was a far better plan. The quest progressed, and eventually the orcs start to believe that the Alliance is coming for them, so they make ready to move to a better spot. That's the opportunity all sides have been waiting for. Khaz'goroth managed to rouse the other aspects, despite their fears over the demon soul. Deathwing makes ready to pounce and claim his prize. Rhonin, Vrisa and Falstad save the day and grab the demon soul from the orcs. But then what? The artifact was not going to be broken so easily. As luck would have it, Rhonin was smart enough to figure out that he could use a gem which was gifted to him by Deathwing to assist and communicate on this mission. Since the gem was crafted from Deathwing's own being, it allowed him to slice open the disc and send the aspect's power back to their rightful owners. For the first time in 10,000 years, the aspects were operating at full capacity again. Alexstrasza had managed to break her bonds and eat her tormentor. Now all that was left was to dispel the lie that Deathwing was invincible. The aspect was sent running, and Rhonin now had some powerful friends and allies amongst the dwarves and dragons. He returned home, of course, with beloved Vrisa at his side, and they'd soon get married, and Windrunner would become pregnant of their miraculous twins. Not the only child in their household, as when her sister Illyria joined the Sons of Lothar through the Dark Portal, In order to stop the horde once and for all, they needed someone to take care of their child Arator, and that job fell upon Verisa and Rhonin. Although, at the time, the stories don't mention this, as Arator wasn't a thing quite yet. He was added later into the story, and even later still did they add that it was Rhonin and Verisa who had taken care of him.
But couldn't you have reached out to us? To your people? To me?
Arator, not a day passed that your mother and I didn't...
Every choice we made was to keep you safe. It broke our hearts to be apart from you.
So, one big adventure behind them. Rhonin's status amongst the Kirin has quite improved, and now Khaz'goroth and the dragons look favorable upon them. But peace would rarely be offered to Rhonin and Verisa. You might recall Warcraft 3, where the undead scourge roamed the lands, and Dalaran was destroyed by Archimonde. What little that remained of Rhonin's family had perished early in this war. His mother had been long dead, but his father, brother, and 2 cousins had all been slain in the fall of the city of Anderhall. He had not seen any of them, not even his father, since entering the ranks of wizardry. But Rhonin had discovered an emptiness in his heart when the news had arrived. The rift between himself and his kin, caused in great parts because of his chosen calling, that vanished in that instant. All that mattered at the time was that he had become the last of his family. He was all alone, except of course Verisa. Despite the horrified voices emanating from both Verisa's people and Rhonin's wizardly masters, they had chosen to never be parted again. They had sealed a pact of marriage and tried to begin as normal a life as 2 such as they could possibly have in a world torn asunder. They'd stopped their efforts helping rebuild the Shattered Alliance and settled in one of the most peaceful regions left, near enough to shatter Dalaran, but not too near. They lived in a modest but not completely humble home, and the people of the nearby town respected them. But then Khaz'goroth showed up to disturb his peaceful life once more. Rhonin would be called back into action by Khaz'goroth, who had received a dire message from Nosdormu, bronze dragon aspect of time. While scouting the timeways, something went wrong, and Nosdormu got trapped by the old gods. He was in need of aid, and so Khaz'goroth was in need of assistance. Rhonin decides to join him, after some convincing by Verisa, and together they fly out to investigate, figure out what was happening with Nosdormu. The orcs also received visions. Broxigar would find himself taken by the same time anomaly that sucked up Rhonin and Khaz'goroth. The 3 of them were taken, sent back in time, all the way back to that War of the Ancients over 10,000 years ago. The very same war in which Deathwing had created the Dragon Soul, meaning that there is a timeline in which the War of the Ancients played out without interference of these 3. And then there's an altered version of the timeline where they did travel back. A version in which they played a vital part in the war against the Burning Legion. For if they did not win, would Azeroth even have a future? What would happen to Rhonin's beloveds if they did not stop Sargeras here and now? One of the more cool details is that the time travel has an opposite effect on Rhonin and Khaz'goroth. The dragon's powers were halved because there was already a version of him in this timeline, whereas Rhonin's spellwork was amplified due to the influence of the Well of Eternity. This gigantic well of arcane power was still condensed and held together, whereas in Rhonin's time, the well has already imploded, and magic wielding in general, it had a couple of extra 1,000 years to develop. So, when he tried to cast a small fireball, he suddenly set the whole forest on fire, Or when trying to cast a small spell at the demons, it suddenly created a massive expanding wall that turned the demons to ash as it went through them. Even Queen Azshara and the Highborn sealing off the well and fully focusing its powers on that portal that was bringing in the Legion. It did not fully stop him, and one of the elves that was still somewhat capable of keeping up with him was none other than Illidan Stormrage. Whereas Malfurion had found his path in Druidism under the guidance of the demigod Cenarius, for Illidan there was no substitute than good old magic. Seeing the expertly woven spells that Rhonin was throwing out had him quickly worship the man, wanting to learn all that he knew, and Rhonin was willing to teach, but also quickly saw how brash, reckless, and selfish Illidan was. The elf had little concern of his fellow people when throwing out his spells, his ego being far more important to him. So Rhonin made a mental note to keep an eye out. As we know, Illidan would decide to act as a double agent and pretend to side with Sargeras and the Legion, which earned him Sargeras' so-called blessing, losing his eyes, and eventually embracing the path of the Demon Hunter. For Rhonin, Krezus, and Broxigar, and all of the other defenders Azeroth mustered, like Tron the Whisperwinds, Malfurion, dragons, demigods, and so much more, this war took all that they had, as more and more demonic forces made their way onto the planet. Archimonde himself walked the battlefield, setting his sights on that powerful human, capable of wielding insanely powerful spells. Horrific pounding filled Rhonin's head. The sound of battle faded into the background. Harder and harder the pounding grew. Through his agony, Rhonin understood that he had been attacked by some spell, yet this one had hit with more stealth than any in the past. Briefly, the wizard fought of the Nafrezim, whose power had animated the dead, yet this did not feel like their work. The agony became overwhelming. Rhonin struggled against the crushing sensation, but already knew that he was losing. He was near to blacking out, and if that happens, he feared he would never wake again. In the midst of the attack, an emotionless voice echoed in his thoughts. "You cannot stand against me, mortal." The wizard needed no one to tell him who spoke. As Rhonin's strength at last failed and the blackness took him, the demon's name echoed through his fading senses. Archimonde. The wizard was caught in the masterful spellwork of Archimonde, but thankfully Jared Shadowsong managed to pull him away, and then his sister Maiev, with another priestess called Gia, they prayed to their goddess Elune, and while it was a hard struggle, their chanting was heard. Their goddess's blessing saved the human's life. The gods favored Azeroth's defenders, as due to the great struggles and sacrifices. Let's never forget Broxigar standing off against Sargeras himself. They managed to shut down the portal at the Well of Eternity, preventing Sargeras from coming through and sending the Legion back to where they came from. In turn, this also stopped the old gods' plans and set Nosdormu free. Once more, Rhonin had proven to be a true friend of the dragons, and as a reward for his heroic deeds, Nosdormu made sure to send him back in time, just in time to witness the birth of his children. No one had ever recorded a successful human-elven birth, and now they expected not one child, but two. Twins from a mage and an elf, with elves seldom giving birth and very rarely giving birth to twins. Surely this meant they were going to be destined for great things, which is just what Rhonin was worried about. But now, as he watched and waited, Rhonin thought of all the astounding events he had recently been a part of. He had passed through time, survived the first coming of the Burning Legion, and had aided in the effort to save the world and the future. But none of that, he discovered, was as miraculous as what he was a part of now. And for that, he gave thanks that he and the others had succeeded. His time travel shenanigans would not be forgotten by Malfurion and Tyrande. So when the leaders of the Night Elves got married, Rhonin was of course on their guest lists, and he in turn would not have missed that day for anything in the world. But it also shows that the timeline has been most definitely altered by this time travel. This is where we'll pause the story of Rhonin for the moment. But don't worry, next week we'll continue the story, talking about Windrunner family trying to steal their children, Rhonin leading the Kirin Tor into Northrend, leading a raptor army, the bombing of Fedamore, and so much more. So for now, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Subscribe if you like my videos, new uploads every Monday. And until next time, see ya!